Hello, it's me. I'm back to talk about a little bit more house party things, just kind of how I threw everything together. As a behind the scenes, if people are kind of interested about how I made it or wanted to see my process. So, even this image was quite interesting actually. It was based off of some promotional material from House itself. I'll try to pull that up. And then you can actually see what everything looks like. And I've used this for many other social events. So as you can see, there's a bunch of other junk here. But there's a lot of different parts to this. So one of which obviously is this picture of me. This was kind of the easiest part. You can see I'm just wearing like basketball shorts and the suit top because you don't even see that. This house logo, obviously just the house logo. These are text elements. And then I got these wing elements. And where are the wings? There we go. There are the wings. And this blue background. And then from there, this snake was actually really difficult. Right here, this is what the snake actually looks like. So to create the picture I did, to have it look like this, is I essentially cut it up into all these like different segments of it. And you can see that this long part across my body actually, like there's a line, a faint line there, where it was like, two different parts of the snake. And then I went into a different tool and actually like drew, I guess, over any of those inconsistencies to make it look a lot better. And also around my head, because there's like little white patches. You can see like the white patches here. It edited those out. So you can see this version, I did not edit as much. You can see that there's still the line there, but the original version that I used, I did like a little bit kind of more airbrushing to make this image look a little bit better. But yeah, that was kind of the main image. This actually took a while. This probably took like 2 hours. But I was really happy with the result. I thought it was really funny. I intentionally went with this kind of like comical, cartoonish spin on the actual house promotional art, and I was really happy with it. So moving on. When they did the Vicodin scavenger hunt at the beginning, I mean, that was pretty obviously Tic Tacs. Wasn't really complicated. You put them in Ziploc bags, you hide them around. Not really thrilled with this event because I feel like there wasn't really much of a challenge to it. It kind of just felt more like a chore in hindsight. So not my best work, but I just wanted to kind of do something small to get like the juices flowing with people before we started off. So I think next time, same thing, to have a little something off the bat, but maybe make it a little bit more interactive than just looking for something. Next up, so this was the patient health history form. This was also pretty simple. I just went and found a random health history form off the internet and just kind of filled out this information somewhat randomly. The patient's name is also Cole Ma, and they were in a coma. I thought that was really funny. Also, one kangaroo court, right? Because you're in a kangaroo court. I don't know. You just kind of throw in little puns wherever, and I just made up this like tonsil surgery. I don't know, right? Like no one was really going to look at this anyway. It wasn't really relevant to the case, but I tried to throw in some little nods to different things, right? And this date is the date of house night, the 7/25/25. Keeping it pushing. Test tubes. These weren't the exact ones I used, but because these are like $32. These are like real test tubes, but I just got like a small party pack for like $6. Came with plenty of them, and then you fill them up with like this kind of concoction. I did like a juice with different liquors because I couldn't kind of figure out a good liquor, but they all tasted pretty gross, except for obviously one of them was just juice. So there wasn't even really much to like the mystery here. Like I didn't even really explain like what the blood would kind of tell us, but I thought this was kind of, again, a fun way to break the ice, right? You have like a little drink right at the beginning, and it kind of gets people ready for the unexpected. I also made a test tube rack. So essentially just got a piece of wood, drilled a bunch of holes in it, and then like sat the test tube into the rack. So it looked a little bit more professional, I guess, but not really because it was made out of wood. But I thought it was a nice touch. So moving on. The crossword. I was really proud of the crossword. I thought that some of these were not as creative. Like an acronym for heart condition that skips beats or flutters, also a kind of plastic pipe that's 9 across, that's PVC. That's not really something that people would really know. And like, it's a really obscure medical thing. But for the most part, I think I did a really good job of blending house related questions with just regular trivia questions, because I wasn't really sure how familiar with house some of my guests would be. So like, that's why I thought 7 was excellent, right? House's ex-girlfriend whose mother has it going on. Stacy's mom's got it going on. Like, there's other routes to get to the answer. It's just usually the house one is a little bit easier, but all kinds of fun little things. I also love 12 down. Cuddy can't say this to house. It's no. I just think that's hilarious. I did this manually. I kind of just came up with a certain number of questions that I knew I wanted to include, and then just started kind of plugging all those in. I think I started with this weird part in the middle. And then like once I had started to create a basis for it, it would kind of guide some of my other questions. And then like some of them, it's just kind of easy. Like I wanted to do one about speed, and I'm like, okay, where do I have something that I can connect through that, right? I needed like an E or a P or a D, and I got, oh, there's a D right here. Like, so I'm just going to do this 12 across. House gives Wilson this drug whose street name is similar to Quick, right? That's speed. And I thought that this was nice because the DDX is such an important part of every episode, where they're sitting around and like the doctors, like that's when they mainly interact with House, right? Is they tell him, I think it's this, I think it's that. The patient has whatever. So I wanted to kind of have that session up front where, like, before we even do anything with the patient, because again, House never even sees the patient, right? So to leave the patient totally out of this is really on brand. That's another thing I liked about House Night, is his structure is so unorthodox, and like breaking the rules, not following regular medicine rules is like so standard that I didn't have to like think about that stuff, plan that stuff, come up for a reason why we're like violating the patient's rights. It's like, no, I'm just House. Like, we're just going to do this because I'm House. But I thought that this was a really good way to kind of simulate that like back and forth feedback, because obviously people don't know what actual disease it's going to be. And I am not going to go make up some fake medical thing where they have this giant list of 20 diseases and they have to like pick which one. I don't know. I just don't like that style because it's so dependent on like the worksheets. Versus this is like people can just see it and be like naturally come to certain conclusions on their own, which I think is what they enjoy the most. But then also, I didn't quite specify this in the other video, but like certain squares would be labeled, and that would correspond to like 1, 2, and 3 down here, and then 1 would be an M from some word, and then an R from some word, and then an I from some word, and be like, oh my gosh, it's like MRI. I will say, I gave everyone the hints at the same time, and I think some of these were a little bit too easy. So I think that I instead should have read the questions off. I also could have been a little funny, because obviously I was House. So instead of saying House's ex-girlfriend, I could have said my ex-girlfriend. Haha. But if I had read the questions off, it just kind of slows them down and stretches the event out. Versus like people kind of blasted through the questions, and then they're just kind of sitting there waiting to give their answer, because I can like only write so fast. So that possibly would have been a little bit more engaging. It was hard to keep up with people, which like, again, if you have 6 people there, these are definitely not like impossible questions, right? Like that pretty much means you're going to have 6 answers you got to write down at a time. That could have been a little bit better. But other than that, I was pretty happy with the crossword. I also just like that DDX ends with X, and then you can say X word instead of crossword. I just thought that was clever. Moving on. This was my magnum opus that I missed out on, that I was so sad that I wasn't able to include, and it's because, of course, I saved it for the last minute, was scrambling, couldn't quite get it to a point that I wanted to, but I went and bought this phone for like $8 from a thrift shop, went ahead, popped the screws, opened it up. You can see this is the inside. So my master plan was essentially to run some wires from the inside of this phone out through like the bottom and into a microcontroller. And then from there, essentially simulate a phone call. So the way that this would work is, going back to the other one, the pressing this part of the phone down, I don't know what it is, the receiver, there's a switch in there, which if we can go back to the other one, you can see is this gray, light white, I guess, switch right here, which we can wire things to, run that out the back. This button up front is the speaker button. And obviously we have this big speaker here, which I was hoping to drive from Raspberry Pi, which unfortunately that's too much power, so I could have tried to figure it out another way or just like spoofed it. But ideally I wanted the volume to come out of the phone. So the way I had envisioned this is that I would also have some other kind of secret switch that I would press, and it would wait maybe 10 or so seconds. And during those 10 seconds, I would walk around, do other house things to kind of distract them, and then the phone would start ringing. So again, the microcontroller hooked up to the speaker, it would just start playing like a, dial tone. And I would go, and when I picked the phone up, this switch goes from low to high, and the microcontroller again picks that up, so it's going to go ahead and wait. And then when I press speaker, which is this button here, again, really easy to wire into the bottom of it, run it out the back, it would just start playing a track. And that track was a compilation of Cuddy's voice from like several different episodes that all kind of weaved together to form a conversation. So maybe I'll show that later too. But I went through, watched certain episodes, watched clips on YouTube, picked out specific bits of audio so I could like make a conversation with Cuddy. So I had a whole conversation with her, which I'll show you in a bit for what I plan that to be. And then when the conversation's over, it would play this kind of like, tone as if she had put the phone down. And then it would just make this really obviously loud noise. And I would just put the phone back on the receiver, and that would be that. And I'm really sad that I missed out on that, because someone even asked me at the very beginning of the night, they're like, "Oh, is Cuddy going to be making an appearance tonight?" And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, right? Because I had planned it and I hadn't been able to come through on that. And I think that they meant that sarcastically, but if I had been able to actually follow through on that, it actually would have been extraordinarily cool. I also think that you'll see with the next event, here's also exactly what I was talking about with the phone. These are the wires going in. One of these that's coming out of the keyboard, this is like the actual switch that I would hit. It's really subtle. I could hide it under the table or something. It doesn't make a noise or anything. And then I would kind of have my time. And then you can see I got everything else wired. And I didn't actually end up wiring it to the speaker of the phone because, again, I didn't have enough power to drive that. So for now, just for the example so you can see it, I just ran an aux cord to like a speaker that has its own internal power. But you can see I went pretty hard on this, right? Like, that being said, this phone also was $8. And I'm thinking about like $8 for a gag this cool, 100% worth it. Just next time, need to start a little bit sooner. Hit the secret switch. Someone's calling my office phone. Who could be calling my office phone? What? This is so insane. Hi, you've reached the office of House MD. If you're hearing this message right now, it's because
What are you...
Hi, Cuddy. You remember the coma patient in 302? I'm gonna let the new guys have a crack at him. I want to see what happens when they drive.
We don't experiment on helpless patients.
Ah, come on. I'm gonna get the guy better. What else can you ask?
I'm asking you to do your job.
Look, I'm gonna get the guy healthy, try something new. You get a healthy patient. Can't we come to some sort of compromise?
There already is a mechanism for that. It's called the employer-employee relationship. I get what I want, and you don't.
Anyone ever told you you're no fun?
Why am I the only person here who cares what happens to this hospital?
Maybe because you're the one who runs it?
Get off your ass and get your department under control.
Sure. And when I do, can I have my balls back? I'm gonna take that as a yes.
House, what are you... We don't experiment on helpless patients. I'm not asking you to love him. I'm asking you to do your job.
Compromise. It's the grown-up way to resolve our differences.
There already is a mechanism for that. It's called the employer-employee relationship. I get what I want, and you don't. Why am I the only person here who cares what happens to this hospital? Get off your ass and get your department under control.
So this is now the MRI, and as it transferred into the MRI, toxic, genetic, and the people split up, if I had had that Cuddy conversation, I could have hung up the phone and been like, okay, Cuddy doesn't want us to run all these tests, so we need to do it fast and try to get it done before she gets back so that she can't stop us. And I could also kind of foster some competition of like, this is going quickly, so, just go try to figure it out as best you can. So I maybe, and I don't know if exactly if I could have been able to do this, rather than assign people to one of 3 different stations, I could just say, like, here's the instructions for all 3 for everybody. Maybe I form them up into 3 different teams, and I kind of give each team the instructions for all 3, and I just say, go and do it. And, like, whoever comes back with kind of the winning stuff, they get, I don't know, more praise or something. Okay, so getting into the MRI, this was another very interesting beast. So I actually have this Python code that does an interesting thing for me. It takes this video of a brain MRI that I saw online, and you can see that it will write these annotations as like little fonts, and you can see like these are all the different hints that I wanted to include. It essentially stitches this text into the image of each frame. So it takes the video, breaks it up into a bunch of images, and then throws the text onto like certain frames and certain spots. And like with these numbers, I can kind of manipulate exactly where it goes, but I was able to make a lot of changes really quickly, right? If I wanted to change like the font or the size for several of them, right, I only have to change that one time, and I changed it for all of them. I guess obviously I put the font several times, but I could tweak specific numbers. I could tweak what frames they appear on. I could tweak how much of the MRI YouTube video I wanted to use, right? Whether I wanted to use 500 images of it or 1,000 or 250, I could tweak that very easily, and I ended up doing that because my first run I thought it was way too hard or way too tedious, so I kind of broke it down into like way less images, so it was like kind of easier to sift through some of them, and overall was pretty proud of this. I was glad also the way that I set this up with the program, I was able to make it really flexible, and that ended up coming in handy later. So you can see these were some of the images from the brain. This one, like F4, like there's an actual hint there. And then I also created this batch file that you would run it. And let's see if I actually have a copy of that now. Yeah, so here's the actual scan software that I used, and username lcuddy@ppth.net. And then, of course, if I like put in a wrong password, it'll actually prompt me for a new one, which I thought was really cool. I don't even know if they saw that because they maybe just typed the password incorrect off the bat. But, you know, I just figured why not put that little detail in there. Okay, I don't even remember what the password is then. But anyways, it just kind of says like starting the MRI, blah, 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 blah. And then, of course, you have all the images that you can flip through. It was in this folder here. And then they have the map, which I kind of already went over in the other video. Obviously, it was like really easy to make. I essentially just had a bunch of blank grids. I knew what I wanted the answer to be, and I just kind of like put those letters down, paid attention to what positions I put the letters, and then just filled in a bunch of junk letters everywhere else. So this one, I also waited way too long and did this at the last minute. Fun fact, word searches, really not that fun, really not that creative. Especially this one was extremely tedious. The area that was given to them was way too large. It was way too hard to find the specific things, and I made it even harder because I gave them 6 things to look for and told them only 3 of them were actually on the sheet. So this was a big pain in the butt. It was really hard to find some of these things. I feel bad. I think this was probably the weakest point of the whole evening, but definitely some good feedback. Word searches are not fun, and test some of these things beforehand before you do it yourself. So I actually had someone run a test on this beforehand, and they didn't seem to have much of a problem with it, but I guess they were just really good at word searches. Last thing for this is, had I made the whole night competitive after the Cuddy phone call, I think it would have spurred people to be a little bit faster with this, and then it's not as boring when it's like, oh crap, I have to get to this before someone else does, versus them just sitting there kind of waiting around. I also only provided them with 1 copy of this patient's DNA code, which is kind of annoying. Like I could have just given them several copies, and I also could have made these symbols like way bigger, even if I was going to make it this big, but this was just kind of hard to actually see when it was printed. Again, not my best work, but we learned from it. Next up was the search. I mean, this was pretty easy. We just take 10 dangerous looking things and just kind of like hide them around the garage. Some of them are in pretty creative spots. Some of them are maybe hidden a little bit too well, but we also had people kind of like pass stuff when it was right in front of them, which I guess I understand. You don't have all 10 things memorized, but It was okay. I think, again, some of these items were hidden a little bit too well. And like the Vicodin, I think people just get kind of tired of like searching for things over and over and over. So I was pushing that a little bit too much. I think for my next kind of event, maybe no searching sub-games. This was one of the copies of The Patient. You essentially just get a shirt and pants, fill it up with bubble wrap. The head is actually a jar of almonds that was cut into with a hole saw and like a piece of paper around it. The hat, I think, is a great touch. Instead of doing hair, you just put a hat on them. You can see they got a little face. The boba straw is great. So obviously I just filled this up with beer, and that was like the fluid in their lungs. So when they come over, they just got to drink beer with a straw, which is a little strange, but you know, I like getting people out of their comfort zone. So this, I actually had a very handy tool that hopefully I'll show now, but essentially it was a little clicker that would control an outlet, and the outlet is essentially just controlling a buzzer. So I can hit this little device in my pocket, and as long as I'm even remotely close to this room, that's a pun, haha, it will turn on this buzzer, and like you can hear it from the other room. So then like we run in, and then once I've kind of decided they've drank enough of the beer, I just hit off, and suddenly like the beeping stops. So that was all good and dandy. Keeping it pushing, right? The surgery, I thought it was a little fun, making them put on some gloves and a mask just to make it feel like they're actually in surgery. All the lights were off, and then we had like a spotlight kind of beaming down, which I think also added to the atmosphere. This is another, clearly just fake shoes. I made hands out of rubber gloves, like you blow air into it. This is a second almond jar, so like this is a whole second body. And he's got this game inside of him, which we'll see in a second, but for the most part, like he's just stuffed. So inside, this is the game Rush Hour. If you've ever played it before, it's really fun. I just took one of the Rush Hour puzzles and just replaced all of the pieces with like these little 3D printed pieces that look like they are stomach. And then the black one was like a special one that I made and then spray painted black. But essentially, I thought this was kind of like a surgery where they got to do something a little intensive little brain puzzle, and it makes sense that like the tumor slides out, and then they get the tumor out, and then like the patient's all better. So here's some kind of iterations. I first found someone made this custom bus piece for the game Rush Hour, and I took that online and I printed it out, and I realized that with my specific printer, the dimensions were like a little too fat. So I kind of played around with it and just like got these frames down. As you can see, they're not like printed the best, but I cleaned them up. And then here's like an example of, I actually kind of tried to make it look a little bit stomachy, and those were our cars. Then of course, the house wrap. House wrap was great. Not too much to say about it other than I just thought about specific moments from the show, put together a bit of a wrap, and had to practice it a couple times. I also had to take that kind of beat from the show, that kind of like instrumental opening. I sped it up a bit because otherwise like the rap was really slow and not as intense. So I just kind of took that beat, sped it up a little bit, did a little bit of rapping over that. And then that was the end of the night, right? So at the end, they kind of come through, they do the rap, and that's that. So that's how I made House Night, little behind the scenes. Obviously, if you're interested, feel free to ask any questions. I definitely learned a lot from this event. I'm glad that I did it, and I'm looking forward to when I can kind of put those skills to work in the future. So hopefully you enjoyed. Either way, have a good one. Bye-bye.